So let's talk about that Kill Bill, eh? Whenever you come up to me and ask me about like my favorite modern directors, Quentin Tarantino's gonna be there somewhere. And I feel like for a lot of people, that sentiment carries over. And there's a very good reason for that, too. I mean, he's able to perfectly blend campy and ridiculous violence in with clever dialogue, stories and characters you care about, just overall really interesting scenarios that not many directors have been able to consistently pull off time and time again. However, out of all of those films, I believe that Kill Bill is probably his most energetic film, and for me personally, I think Kill Bill is what boosted Quentin Tarantino into legendary status. Now I say that because even though Pulp Fiction was already made by this time, I credit Pulp Fiction to boosting him into stardom, not quite legendary status. You gotta take into consideration that there are a lot of directors out there who make their first few hits within the first couple of movies they make, and then they just fall off the wayside after that. The greatest example being M. Night Shyamalan. And considering how Tarantino followed Pulp Fiction up with Jackie Brown, which mind you isn't a bad movie but just isn't as good, I think for a lot of people at the time that kind of signified that Tarantino got as good as he was gonna get and then started slowly declining from there. Because if we're being honest here, a director's decline usually starts with a film that's not as good as the others and then it just slowly gets worse from there. Tarantino took that sentiment and said, fuck you, I'm gonna make one of the greatest goddamn martial arts flicks of all time. Eat my fucking dick. And that he did. Not only did he make one of the best martial arts films of all time, he made two of them. On top of that, I think Kill Bill also pulled Tarantino out of this little, preconception. I say that because before Kill Bill, he was pretty much known for making, gangster movies, so to speak. Pulp Fiction, Reservoir Dogs, Jackie Brown. They're all kind of based around gang violence, not like street gang, but more like ghetto mafia. But Kill Bill kind of turned the tables in the sense where his gimmick wasn't just... He wasn't just making films about heists and setups. Kill Bill also proved his creative vision, something I'll talk about in a second. I keep having to interrupt because this is what happens when you don't make a script for video, kids. Don't fucking do it. Pull out. He was more known for his clever dialogue and his ultra violence, which, let it be known, he boosts the violence in these films to a fucking million. Like, as I was rewatching this film for like the third or fourth fucking time for this video, I noticed whenever Black Mamba was fighting the crazy 88, she literally cuts a dude in half and his entire body just falls apart. Like, Jesus fucking Christ, that's the most cartoony shit I always see. And I fucking love it. It really sort of established Tarantino's creative vision in such a way where the other movies couldn't. And on top of that, it also takes the whole narrative structure that Pulp Fiction kind of set up. Actually, I think Reservoir Dogs set it up a little better, but Pulp Fiction's more known for setting up this sort of narrative structure that isn't point A to point B. It's more like all over the fucking place. And I think it did a better job with it. Here's the issue with Pulp Fiction. While it's a really entertaining movie and all the plot points and all that are really fun and funny to watch, they don't really relate to each other in a super meaningful way. You could say the whole story of the girls does relate back to fucking Jules and Vincent because Vincent dies, but it's very clear that Vincent dies after the events of Jewel leaving, and Jewel leaves at the end of the movie, so it doesn't really tie together. Basically, while it is a very entertaining movie and it's a fun experience, it doesn't, that whole narrative gimmick is just a gimmick. It doesn't tie anything else together in a very coherent or solid way. Which is funny because that's the thing it's known for, but in Kill Bill, the narrative structure is kind of all over the place. You know, it's not just point A to point B, but likewise, every event is still connected to each other. There's a reason why it happens in this film, and I think I really appreciate that. Then again, Kill Bill tells a more concrete story than Pulp Fiction did, so it makes sense. On top of that, I think Kill Bill really tied down the narrative focus. Like, Reservoir Dogs, I don't know how to pronounce that, fuck me. Reservoir Dogs, played with it a little bit. Kill Bill, on the other hand, is a much more complex story that has, like, everything working in its favor, so Tarantino really expertly crafted the narrative focus. When the story's going all over the place, you know, O-Ren Ishii's already dead by the time the fucking movie starts, but you don't really get confused on how or why it's jumping around so much because it's told in just a very captivating and interesting way. It's really kind of like, it's like putting together a puzzle piece. And this is something that we've seen from Tarantino movies time and time again following after, especially with Hateful Eight. It was Kill Bill where he really laid the foundations for that to be better built upon. And everything's really just sort of amped up in a technical level. Like, you see so many goddamn shots that couldn't have been done in any of the past 3 movies he made, and it's just so fucking brilliant. There are several points in these movies where there's just crane shots going over, like, where the ceiling's supposed to be, and it's just like, he could have just as easily just recorded a camera walking behind the main focus of the shot, but what he does instead is he rotates it around the scene above where the ceiling's supposed to be to give it a sense of livelihood. Like, there's a part near the end of Volume 1 where Beatrix walks into this bathroom, walks into the bathroom of O-Ren Ishii's, like, hideout. I don't know what the fuck it actually is supposed to be. And then the camera starts, like, it pans over for no fucking reason to the lead singers of 5, 6, 7, 8, which is a really good band, mind you. You should check them out right the fuck now. And then it just transitions from 5, 6, 7, 8 all the way over to fucking just like two random waiters at this place. They're just kind of bickering back and forth, and then suddenly, for some reason, it finally transitions over to Sophie, who's walking back into the bathroom. We basically did a full circle, but that's exactly what's interesting about it. He could have just left the camera in the bathroom, showed Sophie walking in, and then Beatrix is like, "That's a familiar face," but instead, he went through all the effort to get a fucking crane and everything, just to put emphasis on this. I don't know why he did it, but I love it. I think what the whole purpose really is just to instill a sense of, like, livelihood into this world, and he does this not only with interesting camera tricks, but he also does this with, like, really cool, like, imagery. Like, for instance, the beginning of Volume 1, you have that, like, detective, what's his name? Is it Ed Gareth? I don't know, I just remember seeing it on the credits, but you have the fucking detective driving up to the wedding chapel where the shootout took place, and for some reason Tarantino felt the need to line up a bunch of multicolored shades on the dashboard. This is just a minor character who shows up one time in the entire movie, but he still went through the trouble of doing it because it's a cool, it's very cool visually, and it gives, like, a sense of personality to these side characters. There's this really cool thing shared between both Volume 1 and 2, where fucking Elle walks in to a hospital after Beatrix is put in a comatose state, and she has the intent to kill her, and it, like, very steadily, like, it does the split screen thing, and it does it really goddamn well. Like, this is probably the best usage of this effect in the movie. The way it transitions, like, it slides off the screen too, like, that's an entire fucking essay of inspiration right there. It's fucking crazy. Not even crazy because it's hard to pull off, more crazy just because it's so goddamn smooth. But then whenever Elle and Beatrix are fighting again in the second volume, it does a similar thing when they're both falling down, and it split screens a couple of times in these movies, but this time it really stuck out because it felt like since they introduced Elle with that split screen, it felt natural that they'd, like, kind of end off their rivalry with a similar effect. I don't, it's just cool, man. I don't know. Once again, it just contributes to this sense of additional flair that these movies honestly didn't need, because they were already pretty damn good looking, but Tarantino puts them there anyways, just because they look cool. Another really standout scene to me is like this whole thing in Volume 1. I'm talking about Volume 1 a lot because out of the two, it's generally considered to be the best of the two, but don't get me wrong, they're both really fucking amazing. There's this entire sequence from Volume 1 it's just like an anime sequence made by Production IG them fucking selves, set to goddamn spaghetti western music. I don't understand why they changed the mediums like that, but Jesus fucking Christ, dude. This is to date one of the only films that will change mediums entirely like that, and it still like blend in with the rest of the movie. There's so many iconic scenes in Kill Bill where it's kind of like, even though this scene stands out for being literally an entire different fucking medium of animation in one movie, it still kind of blends in with everything in the sense of iconography. I think Tarantino has this obsession with putting weird, like, backwash fucking rape scenes in his movies. I say that because, in Pulp Fiction, it was like an entire subplot. In fucking Hateful Eight, Samuel L. Jackson forces the Confederate general's son to suck his balls, or something like that. I would rewatch that film, but it's fucking 5 hours long. Then in this one, they rape a dead body. Or no, they rape Beatrix in her comatose state. I don't know why I said dead body. She wasn't really dead now, was she? It's just one of those things. It's like a weird gimmick he has in his movies. You know what? Instead of clever dialogue and ultra-violence, we'll make feet and weird rape scenes Tarantino's postal stamps on movies. How's that sound? We cool with that industry? Dang. There's a lot of really fun and funny movie references. Like, this movie's a love letter to samurai films from the director of shit like Ran, and that's the only example I can think of because I'm not very well versed in my samurai films. God help me, I'm out of my league on this one. But on top of that, there's like a lot of just smaller things. Like, the movie immediately starts off with that whole our feature presentation that used to play in the cinemas back in like the 70s. There's like this set piece whenever Beatrix is fighting the boss of the Crazy 88, where he falls into a bloodied pool. It feels intentionally like it's calling back to Scarface there, just due to the way the cinematography is, just the way it's shot. And then you have Pai Mei. Listen, I might not know a lot about kung fu movies or samurai movies, which I still need to get versed on, I just don't have the time right now. But I do know that Pai Mei is like, he's kind of a legend in those movies. Basically, Pai Mei is a pre-existing character in these films that he dies, but he always finds a way to come back. I don't fucking know how. But he's in multiple movies before this one that have nothing to do with Tarantino. His entire existence in this film is literally just a callback, which is also funny because even though this movie is like a bunch of smaller callbacks to other movies, this movie has a lot of iconic imagery and things going in it. Like, this is the reason why low-budget animated movies that go direct to DVD always has that weird scene before the confrontation where Battle Without Honor or Humanity plays. I don't know why there's a lot of movies that imitate that Kill Bill scene because it's fucking Kill Bill. I'm a little more concerned why there's a lot of children's movies that I can't name off the top of my head that imitate that, but I feel like I've seen a lot of children's movies call back to Kill Bill. I don't think any child's going to get that until like 10 years later, guys. You don't have to. But while we're on the topic of Battle Without Humanity, Battle Without Honor or Humanity, can we go over the soundtrack real fast? Because holy shit, the Kill Bill soundtrack for both movies, it's like a special place in my heart. Not even because I love Kill Bill, but more just because these songs on their own are so fucking good.
What are you doing there?
Leave me alone! I'm Kill Billing it right now, dog! We have Charlie Feathers, Louis Baclov, fucking Isaac Haynes. We have the Green Hornet theme by Al Hirt in here. There's no reason why that should be in there, but there's no reason why any of this shit should be in here, you're right? Like, if this were made by any other director, it'd be a pretty standard, like, action flick, but Tarantino, he set out to make it this huge, like, every moment is just memorable fucking drop blue ball paste fucking crazy samurai film. Don't even get me started on Santa Esmeralda. Holy I didn't know about this song that much before Kill Bill, and this is like one of my favorite songs. It's so good that I used it for my opening. Then we got the 5, 6, 7, 8, which interesting thing about that, I have very vague memories of this as a child. I remember sometime in the mid-2000s, and I never see anyone point to this, but I was introduced to the song Woohoo by those Voyager commercials that used it all the time, which is kind of weird because it's a Japanese band, but whatever, man. Who fucking cares? But yeah, the 5, 6, 7, 8s are in this. They're fucking good. I love their music. Hit me up. You have fucking Zemfir. Now, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but I've looked into this guy before. He makes the goddamn pan flute sound like an angel's fucking kiss. And needless to say, I think this movie is kind of what boosted him into the mainstream a little bit, because, oh my god, this just so good. He even has a Ennio Morricone. Now, if you saw my video on Good and Bad and Ugly, you know that I'm all about that Ennio Morricone eating a fucking scone in my living room at 3 in the morning. What I'm trying to say is I fucking love Ennio Morricone. I think he's one of the greatest composers of filmmaking, like, ever. Much like the filmmaking, there's a lot of diversity in the soundtrack too. Like, if I tried to point out all the different genres of music used in this soundtrack, it'd kind of be like me going onto a Wikipedia page and going, like, clicking all the references at the bottom of the page. That's what I feel like right now whenever I listen to the soundtrack. I'm, like, trying to pinpoint what genre this thing is, or... And it goes all over the fucking place, but, you know, in a good way. There's this thing I kind of noticed in Kill Bill 2, whenever Beatrix finds out that her child is still alive, whenever Bill's explaining to her the story of her dead goldfish, I don't know his fucking name. He had a name, but it's a goldfish. Who gives a shit? It's less about heroes, and more about the structure in which he tells it. He tells kind of the consequences of what happened first before diving into what actually happened. Like, he's putting it together like a puzzle piece, and in my head I'm like, oh my god, that's like the writing philosophy for Kill Bill, because watching these movies for the first time is very much like piecing the puzzles together. I noticed that for the first time. There's a lot of things I noticed this time around when I was watching it, and it's kind of good, but it's also concerning. I say good because it gives me more material to work with in this video, but it's also concerning because it means there's a lot of footage I have to edit, and finally, I want to talk about the actual fighting and choreography of these fight scenes. Kill Bill 1 had the perfect showdown. Not just Black Mamba versus Cottonmouth, or an Ishii rather, but just like that entire sequence. Beatrix versus the Crazy 88s versus Go-Go versus fucking Cottonmouth, like every bit of that is amazing. It's so iconic, someone even remade it in Postal 2. Now, if your movie, or anything for that matter, is referenced in Postal 2, That's how you know you're up there with the bests, baby. Oh yeah, and also, I kind of forgot to mention this, but it just came back to my mind because I was talking about fight scenes. In the fight with the Crazy 88s, there's like this whole thing where Beatrix blinks and it's like black and white and all this other shit. And I thought that was really cool, not only because it was a genius transition, but also because it more closely emulates the old samurai films that Tarantino is heavily basing this off of. I like how some fight sequences are short and simple. In fact, most are, but others are like this really long, drawn-out thing. Like Orenishi, that whole sequence was perfectly timed versus the final showdown with Bill, which was like 2 minutes tops. Now, why does this thing with Oren Ishii that's like 20 minutes long work, where this 2-minute fight scene with Bill and Beatrix being 2 minutes works, if Bill's supposed to be the last boss? Well, easy answer. If we had another 20-minute segment dedicated solely to Beatrix and Bill fighting, the novelty of that entire sequence from the first movie would be lost, because we've already seen that. We've seen all the cool shit that Tarantino can do with these sets, with the martial artists on board who are helping him like direct this, with the fight choreography and everything else. We've seen it. It's really cool, but now we're more concerned with the consequences of those actions, which is to say, I'm more concerned with Elle and Beatrix's relationship together and their own little rivalry, which is what makes that fight scene so much more compelling than the actual fighting itself. Although, don't get me wrong, the fighting itself is really fucking excellent. I love, but it's just that, like, there's an additional layer of importance that you have whenever these two people have like this. They already have a rivalry going, and Beatrix already has a set goal, so it just flows perfectly into each other. Whereas I'm not as concerned with Beatrix's relationship to Oren Ishii, because it's very clearly established by this point that they're their own characters with their own backstories, and they kind of have this mutual respect for each other, which is really cool. But you know, like I said, a lot of that final fight scene in Volume 1 was really just showing off the flair of what Tarantino can really do, with just some inspiration and some talent, some dedication to turn it into a reality. And I think that's what makes Bill's death scene really work. It's short and sweet, but it feels like it covers all the bases. By the time Volume 2 wraps up, we already know their relationship with each other, and it's really, it's just this really interesting thing to watch and unfold. I think that's also where Kill Bill shines. The enemy interactions, like, they're not just two-dimensional fucking faceless villains. Like, hell, they even give personality to a lot of the Crazy 88s, which the whole point of them was literally just to be like faceless villains, but they ended they're fun and quirky. Maybe for the first girl Beatrix kills, which really acted more as a way to engage the audience into this movie, but Orenishi, fucking Elle, Bud, and especially Bill, like, those are 4 out of 5 of the main antagonists, and they're really, like, they feel really fleshed out. Half of that is obviously due to Tarantino's really good writing. So yeah, what I'm saying is, if you haven't seen these movies already, fucking watch them. They're some of Tarantino's bests. Like I said at the beginning, definitely his most energetic pair of movies. They're really iconic in their own way, and I just fucking love them. Alright? That's pretty much the whole point of this video, just to really vocalize my deep, founded love for these films. That's really all I have to say for this one. New videos eventually, but in the meantime, this is Exro telling you to shove a cactus up your anus. It's a pretty good Friday night. Gangbang good night.